Today, danger, northern winter shocks ahead. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Welcome to this post covering finance and property news with a distinctively Australian flavour. Well, the world economy is approaching the Northern Hemisphere winter in a state of disarray, unable to shake off the coronavirus crisis amidst persisting supply disruptions, soaring prices and resurgent outbreaks. As Bloomberg put it, global surveys of purchasing managers this week are likely to point that way. Among the outcomes anticipated by economists are slowing manufacturing and services activity throughout the Eurozone and the UK, and only modest improvements in the US. With parts of Europe confronting renewed restrictions to contain another wave of the virus, China's rebound fading, and rising infections taking hold in America too, much of the global economy is now staring at the threat of a second northern winter of woe, compounded by a cost of living squeeze amid surging gas prices and supply bottlenecks. Europe is at the sharper end of the advanced world wedge. Record infections in Germany might push authorities to announce new lockdowns, and Austria has already done just that. The continent as a whole is enduring a painful peak in consumer prices. And in the US, meanwhile, former Treasury Secretary Lawrence Summers said he sees no more than a 15% chance that it's all going to work out well, with the probabilities much greater for either stubbornly high inflation or a slumping growth. The extent to which such outcomes play out will inform monetary policy deliberations on the speed of stimulus withdrawals across the Group of Seven, culminating in a grand finale in decisions due to be taken in mid-December. That's when central banks, including the US Federal Reserve, hold their final meetings of the year. Ahead of this week, from the US, we will get a pre-holiday feast of economic data and a possible announcement on President Joe Biden's choice to lead the Federal Reserve will be laid out for investors. The government's report on personal income and spending, which includes an inflation measure tracked by the Fed, will be the main course on data-heavy Wednesday before markets close the following day for Thanksgiving. Other releases on Wednesday include durable goods orders, revised third quarter economic growth, new home sales, merchandise trade, and a final read on consumer sentiment. Existing home purchase data and surveys on November manufacturing and services will surface earlier in the week. And also on Wednesday, the Fed will release minutes of its early November policy meeting in which the US Central Bank announced it would start reducing asset purchases. In the meantime, the White House says Biden will announce whether he'll renominate Jerome Powell to a second term as chair of the central bank or opt for Fed Governor Lyle Brainard instead. Toko inflation figures at the end of the week will also show if Japan is seeing more signs of a pickup in prices as energy costs soar. China sets its loan prime rate on Monday, and Sri Lanka sets rates on Thursday. And the Reserve Bank of New Zealand and the Bank of Korea are both expected to raise interest rates for the second time since the pandemic as they lead the pack in Asia, taking action to step back from full throttle stimulus and get ahead of the curve in stemming any inflation risks. New Zealand currently has an inflation rate of 4.9%, which is well above the Reserve Bank of New Zealand target, and preliminary South Korean trade figures should back up the case for a hike, even if they show signs of stabilising from stellar year-on-year gains. The Reserve Bank of Australia officials will be speaking again, trying to convince the markets on various panels and cast some light on how strongly the central bank will stick to its back of the rate hike pack stance. With more than 2 weeks left before ECB officials enter the quiet period before their all-important decision on the future stimulus, Comments from several of them may rivet investors. President Christine Lagarde will be among the policymakers speaking. The ECB will also release an account of its previous meeting in October, when Lagarde and colleagues struggled to convince financial markets that bets on an interest rate hike in 2022 to tame inflation were probably misplaced. Aside from the monthly Purchasing Managers Survey results due across the continent, Germany's index on Wednesday will provide another snapshot of Europe's biggest economy, just as it reels from ongoing supply interruptions, new infections, and a political system in flux amid continued coalition negotiations. The supply crunch means the German economy will only see slight increases. The Bank of England's decision in December looks laden with suspense on whether policymakers will raise interest rates. Public remarks in the coming week by Governor Andrew Bailey and a couple of colleagues might therefore attract attention. And Sweden's central bank will make its final monetary decision of the year on Thursday, with the Riksbank expected to keep its interest rates unchanged at zero for some time. The focus is likely to be on whether it will signal a hike by the end of 2024. And further afield, Israel is expected to keep borrowing costs on hold on Monday due to strong growth and slowing inflation, driven in large part by the shekel. And in Russia, weekly inflation on Wednesday will be watched closely for any clues on whether price pressures are beginning to ease, as many economists have forecast. And the point about all of this is to highlight again the continued uncertainty we have when we look at the real data. And yet, of course, as I discussed yesterday, markets are still, one, banking on more central bank support if things go wrong, and two, arguing that there is still plenty of upside on market prices, particularly stock prices. Perhaps bonds may be going in slightly different directions now. But as this data comes through, and if in fact growth is slowing, then the chances of rates rising eases back, unless, of course, the inflation genie is indeed out of the bottle. And remember that central banks around the world are being tasked to contain inflation. So ultimately, they may be forced to make a tough decision to lift rates just at the time when they should be considering more support. Oh dear, they have dug themselves a deep, deep, deep hole, and I'm not sure whether they can climb out. The next few months, the northern winter, will be cold and one to watch. I'm Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Many thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.